Hey guys, I'm Sophia. Um, I can't wait to kind of learn more about you guys and work with you guys over the summer for this semester. I know it. I guess I'll just dive kind of right into it. Reading, I kind of was also thinking of our leadership class with Tori. Um, for this summer semester, specifically since it's a leadership class for that class, and the readings really focused on authority as well in that class, and so I was kind of relating um, that class with this class, even though this class is authority based on more of looking at the laws and regulations and who has authority with comparing it to the institution as well as state and federal. Um, but I guess we'll just dive right in. So, kind of looking at the implications of authority for student affairs, kind of just looking at it not just being at the institution level, which I think before reading this week and last week's readings, I think I always kind of thought of it as just an institution level, and yeah, there are laws that they have to abide by, but that's not really the authority figure. But then realizing that the federal and state level, authority wise, has a lot of control over what institutions may or may not be able to do, but then also at some level, institutions may also have rules and regulations that state and federal levels don't have that they can still do. And especially with grants and loans and contracts, which they really, I think, discuss in like page 19 in the Kaplan A-Tel readings, on how that has to do with the level of control, kind of, especially with the federal government. But we also see the decisions being made at the institution level, which I think they kind of discuss on page 22, and I believe they refer to it as faculty institution or student institution contracts, where we're seeing at an institutional level the authority and the decision making and things like that. And then with the differences and comparisons with public and private schools, secondary institutions, we see the level of, I guess you could say, control over the differences between the private and the public with the government. And I think really we see that kind of narrowing down now as we see specifically funding wise. We're starting to see more funding starting to go to private institutions, whereas before and in the beginning it was the government had more control over the public schools because that's where a lot of the funding was going. But now, as we're seeing more and more funding and the tuition and the pay gaps kind of coming closer together between the private and the public sectors, we see that control also kind of coming together as well, where because the funding is also going more and more to private than public as it was before, we might actually be seeing that control kind of evening out, whereas before federal generally had more control over public just because of the funding differences. But I think that might be something that we might be seeing in the future in student affairs, is how much control the government is going to have in the institution based on public and private, but then also it might vary based on the control based on, students who attend on campus, students who attend virtually. We also don't quite know where that's going to settle into, and I think that might have a big difference in how authority-wise the control and the decision-making is going to come into play. And then I definitely found it interesting on page 825 in the Kaplan-Tell readings about how on state level agencies that don't really have anything to do with education making authoritative roles in post-secondary education, which I thought was interesting. But then as I continued to read, I kind of realized actually this is probably really good, especially if you're looking at the agencies that don't have to do with education but are making some of these decisions in education, such as, and some of those examples they gave were like workers' compensation and labor relations, and that specifically would have to do with institution staff and faculty and the rights that they would have as what if they get hurt, or labor laws, or things like that. And so that would come into play with them, but then it could also come in play with student workers as well, on how many hours can they work, how much can they be paid, taxes, things like that. And then I think the biggest one was definitely the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, as, you know, they might not have to do directly with education, but you still need them in all forms of education, not just secondary education, but, primary and middle school and high school. But when you're looking at post-secondary education and the agencies we need, even if they aren't based in education, civil rights enforcement is something that we do need, specifically for social justice, inclusion, discrimination, especially in the society that we're seeing now with everything going on. And it kind of, that specifically, the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency and the role they have authority-wise and decision-making-wise in higher education, I think really came into play when talking about the critical race theory with McCoy and Roderick's article. And I kind of saw that in comparison with the civil rights advancements and things like that. And seeing how in the 1980s we start to see the critical race coming through because of the slow movements of the civil rights advancements. And we see them starting to tackle things such as laws regarding social and economic and racial oppression, and seeing how that then plays into higher education and laws regarding that and authority and decision making. But I think I'm going to kind of wrap it up there. I'll probably be discussing things probably tomorrow with you guys. I'm sorry this is kind of late with uploading the video. I'm going to try and upload in the weeks coming forward, hopefully by Thursday or Friday. That way you guys have more time to respond, and I have more time to respond to you guys. But I can't wait to see where this semester goes.